It is going. There's like a 20-second lag, so.
There we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our very first AMA with the EPR podcast. Thank you so much for everyone else being here today. Really, really appreciate you guys spending time with us. Tonight's event is sponsored by STV Incorporated.
Woo!
STV makes communities better through innovative solutions that connect people, places, and the present to the future. Their experts provide architectural, engineering, planning, environmental, program and construction management, and advisory services for transportation systems and infrastructure, water, and social infrastructure such as healthcare, educational, and justice facilities. Thank you, STV. Really appreciate it.
Super, super thank you. And thank you, Ron, for hooking that up. If you want to check them out, go to STV. Ron, what's the website?
Oh, he's on mute. Yep.
STVAINC.com.
There we
Thank
go.
you. I wasn't sure if the ink was on there or not.
I think so.
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you,
we're
thank
live.
you.
Yep, there it is.
All right,
All right,
so
Laura.
we've met Ron, but our guests for tonight are, and you can see them here on the screen, I hope. Super, super thankful for them for joining us tonight. I'm going to introduce them real quick so we can get started. But we have Sunny Fleming from ESRI, Chris Whitehead, Air Practice Leader at ESI, Dory Larsen, Electric Transportation Program Manager at Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Matt Sekol, ESG and Sustainability Advocate at Microsoft, Mike Mayer, Vice President of NAEP and Senior Director of Environmental Compliance and Strategy. Actually, I think he was just promoted to Senior Project Manager, so congratulations. Ron Deverman, who you just met, Vice President and National... This is the stuff we usually get to edit out. National Environmental Planning Leader at STV. Shannon Oelkers, Alaska's bulk fuel permitting expert and principal. Consultant, owner, principal of Integrity Environmental. Rachel Crane, diver and explorer, aka RachelOnTheReef, who just joined us right now. Ethan Brown, who I accidentally called the wrong name earlier. I'll admit that publicly. Ethan, thanks for joining from the Sweaty Penguin podcast. Juan Rovalo, senior ecologist and nature-based solutions strategist at Jacobs. Mehmet Sasilmis, he's a senior global account manager at ESRI.
Yep.
Oh, nope. Yep. AEC and environmental sector planner. Somebody fix this for me. Eric Newgard, environmental program manager at Port Everglades. Thomas Abdallah, author and vice president of design services at MTA Construction and Development in New York City. And Tom Reese, president of Ecosphere Restoration, Inc. Thank you all for joining. Apologies for any slip-ups there. Again, I don't have the luxury of fixing this in edit this time. So we have our two volunteers with us too. I almost combined them into one person. Morgan Tassone and Samantha Bartleson, and they are here to monitor the questions in the chat. So get those questions rolling. And before we get any further, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button on YouTube, please do. And we are, Morgan is creating a bunch of more shorts for you to indulge in. And we also try to share some outtakes and some other funny mess ups from behind the scenes. So if you hit that subscribe button, you will get notified of those. And of course, the episodes are here too, and you can get the captions if you aren't able to do that with your podcast player.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never made a mistake, I don't think, on the show. So
Not today.
Yeah, not today. I really shouldn't say that, but this is really cool. I'm really excited to, start our AMA, and we've been talking about it for a long time, like months. But why now? Why are we doing it now? Why today?
We decided to do it now because the Environmental Professionals Day, which has been going for 3 or 4 years now, is happening on April 15th. And that is the day that we all celebrate each other and our like-minded fellow people right here who are doing the good work 40 hours plus sometimes 80 hours a week to save the environment. And on the 15th, we encourage people to share stories, post pictures with the hashtag environmental professionals, thank an EP, things like that. If you go to NAEP's or IAIA's page, you'll see information on that and how to share. But basically, we wanted to have this in anticipation of that. And then also, you're leaving for Germany tomorrow, so this was our last chance.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's the closest we can get while I'm still in the country. Yeah, but honestly, I never thought we'd be here with this many people, and it's really, really great. Laura and I are going to either answer some questions or pass them to our guests. If you have a specific question for a specific guest, make sure to let us know. Otherwise, we're just going to use our best judgment, or just ask randomly and see how it goes. You know, if I got a pizza question for Tom at some point because he lives in New York City. It's very important to me. But you know, we'll make sure we get to everyone that's asked, all the questions that are asked to us. So yeah, I don't know. Why don't we just go ahead and get this thing started?
Before we do, I want to ask Morgan and Sam, how are things looking on the YouTube end? It's coming through.
That's a thumbs up.
All right.
So far, so good.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Nick, you taking that first question?
Oh, am I? Okay, great. Yes, I totally knew that. See, we planned it. Actually, so I think our first question, I said I would start with Sunny. So why not? And it's very serious. It's a very serious question. I expect a very serious answer.
I can tell by your caveat.
Right. Yes. Have you ever used your GIS skills to settle a bet or win an argument with friends or family?
Oh, you know
and then
what?
this also applies to you.
So I know confidently that the answer is yes, and that I've probably done this on a few occasions. However, these situations tend to occur in moments that I don't always remember clearly after the fact, if you get my drift. So to give you a specific example eludes me at this moment. Nanette, how about you?
Yes, I remember using it, not many times, but once in a while, like mapping, geography, like we discussed that, simple mapping, not deep GIS, but simple mapping comes a lot.
It's difficult to hide the laptop during, you know, the local bar trivia. So I haven't been able to use it in those situations.
Yet, you know.
Yet.
One day I believe in it. All right, Laura, what's next? What do we got next? Oh, you're on mute. So yeah.
Gosh, look at me messing that up already. I'm going to jump to a question for Dory, because I'm just going to tell you, she's one of my BFs from middle school. So I have to pick a favorite. It's going to be her.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Hey,
sorry, everybody.
she's family. Let's see. If you could switch places with any fictional character who drives an electric vehicle, who would it be and why?
Any fictional character who drives an EV? You know, this is so like, this is on my off time. This is what I do. We went to see They Might Be Giants. Awesome. And in St. Pete, and they were amazing. They killed it. It was such a fantastic show. And they've got a song called Electric Car. I don't know if you guys have all heard this or not, but if you have not, I highly recommend you checking it out. When I taught middle school, they had this whole CD, They Might Be Giants, Here Comes Science. And one of the songs is all about electric cars. And I just think that they're so cool. Like they're so like geek pop brought it all to, you know, to the masses. So I totally would celebrate them. And I want to know like what EVs they drive, because I'm sure they do.
Oh my God.
They're not fictional, but that's where I went.
They're kind of fictional. Good answer. I was kind of thinking, this is a weird question. I'll be honest, that one came from ChatGPT. You all can think that weird question to the AI world.
Oh my gosh.
And I was curious what your answer would be. So there it is.
I do have to say, that just to jump in, that my favorite They Might Be Giants song is C is for Conifer off their kids album.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic.
Oh, they could like take complex ideas, boil them down, and make it rhyme in a cute little song. It's fascinating. Love them.
Gosh.
This YouTube live sponsored by They Might Be Giants.
I wish. Maybe the next one.
There we go. Yeah. We just keep saying their name over and over again. But I mean, has anyone else used ChatGPT at all in their work? And how's it gone? Because I really want to know. Matt, I see you on mute.
Yeah, I work at Microsoft. Of course, I've tried it.
Yeah, right.
So what I'd say is I graduated college with an English degree. I find it useful for helping me supplement what I'm doing versus actually writing things out. Because if you ask it, what I find is when I ask it for a prompt, it does not make sense, especially when it's ESG. Like if you ask it what ESG is, it will give you a bad answer. Don't do that.
Yeah, similarly, I've used it as well to someone asked me to record a really short, like 3-minute demo on a particular topic and on how to use grants.gov in particular. And so I asked it to give me an outline of what a good 3-minute blurb would be on that. And so I used that to develop the demo. So yeah, it was useful in that way.
Yeah, I've been using it as well and finding similar results. I'll, for example, put in a chunk of a podcast script and say, turn this into a Twitter thread or turn this into an infographic, and it can do maybe 80% of the work. I'll have to do some tweaks, but if you ask it to actually give you information, it is terrible at that. It will lie, and then you'll point it out and it'll gaslight you. But what it has been helpful with sometimes, though, is sometimes I just want to talk something out with someone, and I don't even necessarily need them to be an expert in what we're talking about. I just need to like say the idea out loud and have someone be like, yeah, no, you're right. And then I can kind of go do more research, and ChatGPT has been helpful in that sense too, as I'm trying to flesh out an idea, although I have to fact check everything after the fact.
Yeah, right. So maybe we don't use it to write love letters is what I'm hearing.
Well,
I mean, or maybe we do.
I don't know if you saw that New York Times piece with Bing's AI where it professed its love. So it is good at gaslighting. I'll give it that.
Yeah. Don't do that. Don't make it fall in love with you. Or it might just fall in love with you.
Yeah.
I did read, though, recently what ChatGPT has been found to do well is people would put in, like, write an op-ed from the perspective of a climate denier about XYZ, and it will do it well enough that it could be passable. And so there is a little bit of concern that it could make it easier for people spreading misinformation to do that. So hopefully some of the kind of restrictions that it puts in place can limit that. For me, it refuses to even write a pun about a sensitive topic. So I don't know how it's doing climate denial, but we'll see.
Right. It's a fascinating thing. And I don't know if anyone else, I mean, this is my nerd brain going, but like there's even dreams of taking the technology behind it and eventually using that to try to determine how whales talk. And I think that's incredible. But then they were like, well, ChatGPT has, quadrillion data points, and we have 5 for the sperm whale. So it'll take time. But I even think that's fascinating. I love how they're kind of connecting big data to science. It's just kind of the coolest thing. I just hope it happens. I don't know. I'm not saying I want to talk to a whale, but I would if I could, right? I mean, who wouldn't, I guess, is really a better question. But
Rachel,
you just might not want to hear what they say back to you.
Right, yeah. You guys are killing it. Knock it off up there. It's so loud. Yeah.
Rachel's talked to whales, pretty sure.
Yeah, Rachel's almost run into whales, I'm pretty sure. That's what I remember.
Yes. Rachel, any talking to whales going on?
Nah, I haven't seen a proper whale since October.
Oh, unbelievable.
Sadly.
All right, we won't hold it against you this time.
Seen some dolphins though.
Not to brag.
Not to brag.
Strip, you're home for a while?
Yeah, it's more like, when did I get home? Like how many hours, days ago? What day is it?
Right.
Right. But yeah, I've been home for less than 3 days, so I just got back.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for hopping on. It's
You're welcome.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
And Laura, we've got her here. We might as well ask her another question.
Well, I'm hearing that the like I predicted, the scheduled live that we created didn't connect to this Zoom.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I don't know what the point of creating a scheduled live is if it doesn't know how to connect to it when you do it. So if anybody is watching, just go to the browser, collect the new link if you want to share it with someone else who's saying they can't get in. I did also update it on the NAEP page.
Perfect.
But yeah, we've got a couple of people who are trying to find their way here. So we'll keep answering questions until they get here. So let's see, who do we want to ask? Let's go to our sponsor. Ron, what is the most challenging environmental planning project you've ever worked on?
Yeah, just pick one.
Okay, pick one. All right. I would say I managed the airport to university light rail transit in Salt Lake City before the Winter Olympics of 2002. So that was in my earlier in my career, you know, both the NEPA, it was an EIS, and the engineering, and we were under stringent schedule. We did like three years of work in less than a year and a half. But we got the whole system in before the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. So that's just one of them. I've got many, as you know.
Yeah, for sure. Which is wild. And I don't know, there's some real challenges here. I know we've got you and Tom on the transportation side of things. And maybe I was going to ask just Tom this. It's a very important transportation question about pizza. But you know, Ron, you can answer too. Do you fold your pizza, Tom? Is that the required
Yeah,
way to
that's
eat?
required, yes.
It's the absolute way. Okay, we needed to make sure that was definitive.
Yeah, that's the New York pizza.
Right, which is
I don't know where everyone else is from, but we in New York City believe we have the best pizza, but even better, we in Brooklyn think we have the best pizza in the city. So yeah, I've sampled every one of them, and with all different toppings, and Spumoni Gardens on 86th Street in Brooklyn. It's been on several Food Channel shows. So if you're in Brooklyn, anyone would be great, but that one would be my pick.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I would say here in Chicago, I just actually had a pizza last night in Edison Park, which is the farthest northwest suburb of Chicago proper and closest to my home. And it was a thin crust, big slices, and of course I folded them as I was eating them.
All right, so even in Chicago, you can fold your pizza. You heard it here first, folks.
Thin crust, the big thick crust that Chicago is known for, that's a little tougher.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a mess. But I mean, Tom, you've had a lot of transportation projects in the city that you've worked on. Have you had any particular memorable ones that were challenging for you?
I think the very first big project you work on, and I've been with MTA for 36 years, so I go back to the late 80s, early 90s. We did a 1,500-foot connection to link up two different subway lines called the 63rd Street connection, and it was the first EIS I ever worked on. And I think if you're an environmental professional, if you really want to get into every aspect of an environment, of a project from an environmental point of view, get yourself on an EIS, and then you'll learn so much. And then I've been with lead projects, gold certified, lead certified bus depot projects. We do about $5 billion of rehabilitation and expansion work in New York City and the metropolitan area, I should say, each year. So it's, the projects are, I've worked on every single MTA project since 1987, because I started in 1987 as the lone environmental engineer.
Right.
So I worked on I did NEPA reviews on every project, and then I became chief in 2004. So I've literally, if there was a Guinness Book of Records of NEPA projects in New York City, I would be in the lead for that, without any question.
Yeah, and it's kind of incredible, honestly, like where we've come. I think it's a lot of what we hear on the show is, we didn't even have these degrees when I started, and it's really, really cool. Really cool to hear.
Yeah.
All right, Laura.
Does anybody have a new thing they've learned recently? Speaking of new industries and things. Shannon, I knew I was going to call on you for this one.
I do. I just started a project that is stabilizing the foundation of bulk fuel tanks that are being threatened by the warming of our climate, and they have a permafrost lens underneath them, and they're on the north bank of a river, and there's another tank farm on the south bank of the river, and the south bank of the river exposure was enough over the last 30 or 40 years to melt the lens enough that it's now got a thermocycle where it's melting itself faster. But the tank farm project that I'm involved in is on the North Bank and it's not melting faster. And so they're doing all this really cool engineering stuff to keep it deep frozen. And we're talking about installing insulation into the bottom of the tank. And this is something I have never done before. And so I find it really interesting. And we have to do some interesting things, like we normally hydrostatically test tanks after we make changes to them and, you know, weld on them. And I have to make sure that we discharge the water really far away so that the water that we discharge to land doesn't melt the permafrost lens underneath. And so it's just, for me, it's very interesting. We don't often do a whole lot of foundational type projects on top of permafrost. And I just thought it was interesting, and I'm learning a whole lot in this project.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it's funny because in my screen, you are right next to Eric, and, you're Alaska, he's Florida, literally as far apart as possible. But I don't know, Eric, you have issues with water, with what you do at Port Everglades. Like, what are some of the challenges you guys have faced in, this past year, for example? And you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, a huge challenge that came up today is this massive sargassum mat the size of the United States that drifting up the Atlantic. We're really concerned about what that's going to do to our seagrass beds, our coral reefs, and other light-dependent submerged habitats. We're just on the cutting edge of discussing it now.
And do you have any
Very
idea?
scary. Yeah, it's massive. I mean, they could shade out seagrasses and kill them. They could have very detrimental effects on our coral reefs.
The geospatial nerd has to ask,
Yeah,
are
yeah.
you using real-time imagery to monitor this mass? Like how do you apply technology to help kind of assess that, analyze it, understand it, plan for it, all that good stuff?
Well, we're just getting the leading edge of it now. So I'm just looking at the newscast where they're putting up maps. But I hope that there is a website where we can start tracking it to get a better idea of when the mass is going to hit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Give me a call, Eric.
All right. You got it.
The real reason why we're doing it, folks. There it is. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. And yeah, it's such a wild thing. So yeah, I don't know, Shannon, I don't know if you have to deal with any of that. But no, I love it. I love that you guys have different issues, different challenges, but still very cool.
No sargasso mats. No.
Yeah.
I just saw a whole news article on that, so that was really interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah.
It's all right, I'm
but
still
yeah.
helping some people troubleshoot getting here, so
Yeah.
carry on.
Yeah, it's no worries. And
Nate Brills has a question though in the YouTube chat, if you saw that.
I did not.
It's a good one. Can you see it? You want me to read it?
Yeah, just go ahead and read it.
Okay, so this one we can kind of, who hasn't talked yet? Let's see, this would be a good one for someone.
No pressure.
Okay. Can the presenters describe any successful strategies or techniques they've used for managing complex or high pressure projects? I know none of you have worked under pressure before. Anyone want to volunteer for that one? High pressure project. Nick, I know you can talk about high pressure projects.
I think all of every project I've ever worked on is a high pressure project.
Right.
Whether it's a schedule, the project manager wants to get the schedule done, or the community wants to get a project done, or I don't think there is a non-pressured project, and I think you just sort of get used to it. I think you get it. You just you have to sort of embrace it. I believe I feel I work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since 2007. So I think you just get into it and do the best you can and then you don't feel pressure anymore. It's just sort of that gets sort of slides off your back, because you just always feel that there's somebody you need to deliver for, and I think that's
the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Juan, I see
I would agree with what Tom is saying, like the current project that I'm working on here is actually in the Chicago region. It's our Metra commuter rail, and I'm managing their largest project right now. They're actually expanding the Rock Island District line, and then that it's extended the project limits from 10.5 miles to 40.5 miles. And they're putting a third main track in, but I'm overseeing their project manager and overseeing their design and the NEPA work. So everything is on a fast schedule, but that's what I'm used to my whole career. And that first project I mentioned back in 2002, it's just been that way all the way through.
Yeah, and that's kind of the life we live sometimes, isn't it?
I would say that the kind of a suggestion to manage a very high complex pressure project is the ability to talk to people. If you can connect and network and communicate, and if you can do that, then all the pressure if you cannot do that, then even if it's a simple project, then you will be in a mess.
That's really well said. Yeah. Even you're allowed to make mistakes too. I would say, like no one's perfect, but you got to be at least a little considerate of your audience and who's listening. That's really good.
I think two part of it is trusting your team and making sure that you're delegating and not absorbing it all on yourself, right? Because that's not going to help. You're going to burn out. But relying on your team and trusting them to do their job too, I think is critical in those kind of big projects where you have lots of task managers and DPMs and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Got some hearts on that answer there, somebody.
Yeah.
All right. So along the lines like Juan was talking about, how do you coordinate stakeholder versus client needs?
Or versus company
being able
ones.
to talk to people has something to do with that.
Well, I think this is really, if I can question, right? Because you have three different needs: the people, the public, the client, and the company. And how do you balance all three of those things to get? I mean, it's hard to make everybody happy, but you got to find a way to thread that needle. How do you do it?
Well, actually, Nick, I think that's a good spot for me to jump in. I do a lot of environmental justice associated work, and as everyone on the call probably knows, the issue's been hotter than ever the last couple of years, and one of the biggest tenets of it is the increased role of stakeholder engagement and getting it past the transactional permit-to-permit model towards more of a community-based partnership engagement model. And going back to something that Juan said before, just being able to talk to people, be honest with them, and give access and opportunities to hear what they want to know, and give them opportunities to come to your events and try to think how to actually take burdens off of them. And actually, as a bit of a tangent, I suppose, but doing the work, issue I've hit a lot that's been extremely frustrating is misinformation. A lot of times people will get a talking point that's just flat out incorrect, but it sounds nice. So everyone decides to run with it. And all of a sudden you get 1,000 comments back on one permit, and 800 have the same comment that's actually completely bullcrap.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to get past, but it's definitely something that a lot of people have to contend with right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, something that, with NEPA, you have to be able to deal with, I think most of you probably have heard the story about us getting, we had a project years ago where the community thought that we were going to drill through their cemeteries and through the graves themselves. And, we're just like, where did that even come from?
Heartless.
So we were drilling through the cemetery. We're like, no, we're drilling under by 20 feet, but in their minds, it was going straight through. So there's, a genuine concern there.
Yeah, I could see a concern regardless if you were going under or over.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Your grandma's there, you don't want her disturbed, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Another question we have: how has technology transformed the way you do your work over the last couple of years, 2 to 5 years? Let's see. Who's working with technology?
Go first. Is that unfair for him to go first? I don't know.
Who?
Matt?
Oh, me.
Yeah, Mr. Microsoft.
Yeah, technology hasn't really changed the way
Yeah, I was about to say.
because I'm
Ironically.
yeah, like obviously we use a lot. We've seen an uptick in a lot of collaboration tools. What I'd say is more from a social perspective, it's been interesting to watch the evolution of, you thought that remote access would provide a better work-life balance, but really what we found, and Microsoft has published a study on this, is that people were working like 10% more because they were sitting at home. They didn't have their commute. They wouldn't get up from their desk, and I experienced that myself. So I think for me personally, it's been pretty standard, but I probably get that Microsoft's probably getting a little bit more work out of me in the last couple of years. But we're starting to see this, I think, balance back towards, okay, I don't have a commute, but that doesn't mean that you get an extra 2 hours of my day because I have a life. That is not what I think the question is, by the way.
I'm thinking maybe, Dory, I would like to hear what's been happening with electric vehicles in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when we have our ride and drive events, you can actually like see people's minds change. And it's such an awesome experience because people have these perceived ideas of what an electric vehicle feels like, sounds like, what it'll perform like. And then when they get to drive them themselves, you can see the light bulb like go off and they're like, okay, now I get it, So I think that experiential opportunity is really important when people, electric vehicles, they're not new technology. They've been around for over 10 years, but for a lot of people, they haven't driven them yet. So it is new technology. So it's kind of fun in real time to see people working through their perceived notions and then what they, see the technology doing and what it can do and how it fits into their life. And some of those kind of intentional, I think, misinformation kind of melt away, like about, range concern and where to charge and all of those kind of things, which, there are still real concerns that we need to address with it, but it's not as hard to overcome as a lot of people think.
Yeah, awesome. So another reason she's my favorite is she let me drive a Tesla and take my hands off the wheel.
The real reason.
There
it is.
I kind of want to jump in on that question a little bit and dare to not necessarily represent ESRI in this moment, but represent kind of the community that I serve as a liaison to. And that's really, state environmental agencies, local communities. And I think something that we're seeing, especially with the infrastructure bill, they have a lot of increased pressure on them to achieve the goals that are outlined in that bill, achieve these really lofty goals of resilience and sustainability while still modernizing our infrastructure and getting things up to speed. And technology is going to play a key role there. And from the geospatial standpoint, all of these things are going to be happening across the landscape, and all of the things they interact with happen across the landscape as well. So to be able to visualize this is really powerful. But a lot of these agencies are still kind of struggling with systems that were built 20 or 30 years ago. So they're really looking at how do we modernize those things? How do we better provide customer service, transparency, environmental justice, all of that around us, while juxtaposing these different data sets together and gaining greater understanding than they ever have been before. So I think that's really a big revolution that I'm seeing right now across the industry.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, and I think even like what I've been able to do this year using story maps to describe projects, which is just a simple thing, but I've never done it before, and now I'm doing it, and people are like, they're like, "This is amazing," and their minds are getting blown because it's just a story that has pictures, instead of just me going, and the building is going to be 200 square feet, which is very small, and I meant to say 200,000. You know what I mean? Like, so it's different, and I love that we're changing that a bit.
Just to add the Sunny's comments there. So we used to go out in the field, collect data, soil samples and groundwater samples, and then we come back to the office, handwritten notes, and then enter it in a computer, and then realize, oh, we missed something. We got to go back tomorrow. So now with the real-time data collection, and then coordination with the project manager, real time, it's a lot better. And sometimes you don't even go to the site. With the drones, you go there with the imagery, collect imagery. And then even with the sensors, you collect data. You remote sensing data, you collect right there and come back. So that saves a lot of time. And then with the satellite and other tools we use, it's a lot better now.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And it's anyone who's trudged through any wetland at all would gladly take a drone and fly over the same place. I think that's pretty fair.
But still, you know,
yeah.
even though you have these amazing apps that they're getting better to identify plants or other species, you know, it's really useful, but still you need to get there, ground truth it, you know, and put your soil and do like this and say, oh, 30% sand, and you know, it's that. I mean, I think that will never go away. I mean, I love the geospatial analysis and remote sensing, but at the same time, the ground truthing is so important because you don't see everything, right?
Right.
Yeah, they have to exist together. I mean, and that's what we see that as a huge flaw all the time when people who might be purely data scientists will do something really cool and fun, but if they don't have that applied environmental background, then those outcomes are nonsensical and you don't know how to interpret them. So the two definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah. And I kind of want to piggyback off this question too. And I know, Ethan, you have used social media a whole lot. So even how that's changed the way that we do things. I don't know necessarily everybody here uses it, but Ethan, I know you've used social media a lot to promote what you do.
Yeah, I'm kind of forced to. And I think that it has evolved quite a bit, even over the 3 years that the Sweaty Penguin has been going. We turn 3 officially next week, which is very cool. And I think the big thing is TikTok, and going from 2020, where I thought it was just for people younger than me and not really something I needed to be concerned about, to in 2021, I was like, okay, we have to be on TikTok. This isn't really a choice anymore. But even at that point, we were really early to TikTok in terms of other media outlets, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what a curated TikTok looks like for what we do, how to generate content that will go viral there. Certainly, we have found that content we post can reach a bigger audience there as opposed to some other platforms, and can start conversations. Whether or not they're constructive is another conversation, but they certainly give us stuff to feed on and answer questions from. In terms of some of the other platforms, I know that some of my colleagues with bigger social media followings have expressed some frustration, including TikTok, but I think particularly Facebook and Instagram, where it's really hard for climate creators to boost their content. A lot of posts, especially ones that mention fossil fuel companies by name, will get pushed down or shadow banned. And I know the Sweaty Penguin's Instagram account is, I don't have any evidence beyond the fact that we have nearly 5,000 followers, and we'll sometimes post a story that gets like 13 views. So it's bizarre. And I know last year on Earth Day, there were a lot of TikTok creators that similarly were finding that the TikTok posts from Amazon and Shell were blowing up, and the ones that they were doing when they're climate creators year round were not blowing up the same way. Twitter, I also know there's been a big boost in climate misinformation in the last 6 months or so. There was a lot during the COP27 conference. I personally am starting to get a little more active on Twitter with ChatGPT, actually. That's been very helpful in doing that. And I think in terms of interacting with other journalists, I really enjoy Twitter. But certainly all of the platforms have their frustrations. But I think what's kind of changed from when I started to now is being able to boost climate content the way I want to, and also just the importance of TikTok as compared to the other ones.
Yeah, really interesting.
It is interesting. All right, Nick.
I want to jump in there really fast. Just say I have a 15-year-old, and he started talking to me about the Willow project because he saw it on TikTok. And I was like, wow, like really kind of shocked that he had ever heard of it, you know, and that, you know, and that TikTok could spark a conversation. So.
Yeah, Willow blew up on TikTok and led us to do an episode about it. And at the Sweaty Penguin, we've been covering carbon bombs for a little while now, and that's been a journalistic focus of mine. And Willow was very unique in that mathematically it's not technically a carbon bomb, though it's part of the North Slope, which is on the list of carbon bombs. But there was so much nuance to the project that I kind of was trying to present a little bit of the nuance around it. And TikTok had just been full of Stop Willow stuff, so people were really not receptive to having a more nuanced conversation about it. But that was good to observe and to take into account in our reporting.
Cool. We have a lot of questions actually rolling in, which is
fantastic.
Shoot.
Oh wow!
So
oh gosh, yeah, we do. Okay.
Online who's submitting questions, but let's try to get through some of these other ones quickly. Next one, how do you ensure environmental concerns stay front and center over the long term for construction projects?
Yeah, a very easy question for everyone here to answer, I think. Yeah, no
TikTok,
issues.
that was where you just answered that, right?
Yeah.
I think that
or transportation people or what?
Yeah, if you've embrace an international standard like we did at MTA called ISO 14001. It's an environmental management system, but puts environmental, you know, everything you do, every decision you make, you consider the environment in mind. And you know, some are really important that, you know, have great potential, really large negative impacts that you want to minimize, or large positive impacts that you want to, you know, promote. So I think, you know, and getting a third party to verify what you do. It's easy for anyone to say, yeah, we're green, we're sustainable, but if you have a third party come in and audit you, and you know, a thorough, you know, certification audit, and then you can then claim, hey, you know, we've got this certification by a third party auditor, and then, you know, includes also embracing, you know, rating systems like LEED and Envision. So I think, to me, I think one of the things is it's sort of an organizational decision that you want to put the environment on top of mind, and then people hold you accountable because you know, you sort of say, hey, this is who we are, and you know, as a mass transit is, you know, a sustainable solution already. We're kind of already a leader in that realm. So when we do design and construction projects, we want to carry that same DNA throughout our projects.
And actually, just to jump in also on that, I'm big on ISO work also, and you mentioned a lot of key points there, but I think one of the essential ones is committing yourself to continuous improvement and also impact minimization. Two essential points of ISO 14001 that a lot of people often forget about.
Yeah, great. All right, Matt's been challenged to also answer this question though, so.
Sunny, I don't know what you're doing. Most of my experience with environmental concerns over long-term projects happen from the real estate management side. So working with financial services firms who are funding, is that why you're nodding?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big challenge. And the reason why I think it's such a big challenge is that when I'm talking with the financial side of the house, it's not always easy to keep those things top of mind because of shifting priorities. So Micah, to your earlier question about stakeholder, I think it was you, about stakeholder engagement, keeping those stakeholders top of mind. I think somebody on the panel here mentioned it earlier, making sure that they're coming to the meetings as things are being developed is critical, especially if it's like a marginalized community, an indigenous community. You have to keep those, you have to make sure the door is open to keep those people engaged, because as soon as, and we saw this with the economy broadly, as soon as the economy takes a turn south, like DE&I programs were the first things that were cut. Same thing happens in commercial real estate projects. So you have to make sure the door keeps open. You have to make sure the pressure stays on them. And I think we're living in a time right now where accountability and visibility is at a peak unless you're Ethan and you can't get the Instagram views, it is literally like people are paying attention to what is happening to communities all over the place. So just keep the pressure on. How'd I do, Sonny?
Juan, I think you had something to add.
I was going to say in the same lines, the partnerships with stakeholders and the people around the place that you are working on. If they are part of it, they will embrace it and they will hold accountability. If you fight them, they will shut down your project. If you work with them, then they will promote your project. So we were talking about this idea of ecological diplomacy, how to be a good neighbor, how the value that you bring to a place with a project, how that benefit is spread around to the community. And then the community will be interested in that keep on going. And if it stops, they're the first one that they will raise their hand and said, no way, you know.
There was that question earlier about technology and how it's impacting kind of all of our industries. And I think this kind of relates to that. And Matt mentioned it earlier that he's seeing an uptick in collaboration tools. And that's definitely something we're seeing as well. And I think it's in response to this idea of keeping these communities at the forefront. Of course, there's effectiveness at varying levels across different geographies, right? Not everyone has the same kind of access to technology, but that's definitely a trend that we're seeing as well, is how do we utilize technology better, even social media, to have two-way communication, not just broadcasting information out. So.
Yeah.
Ethan, do you want to read your own question or should I read it?
I can read it. I am very excited that we have all these transportation people here. I read today in the Washington Post that the EPA is working to finalize some new fuel efficiency standards that, as I understood from the article, are a pretty big deal and particularly ambitious. And I was just curious if any of the transportation folks here either had thoughts about it or if they felt it would affect their work in any way, positively or negatively. But I found that interesting.
Well, go ahead.
We're watching, I think it's the same bill. One of the proposals that the EPA has is to have stricter vapor control measures at transfer points for gasoline. So if you're transferring gasoline at a tank truck loading rack, whether it's in support of construction or just transportation in general, currently the limit is 19,900 gallons a day and under. You don't need vapor control. And if you exceed 19,900 gallons, you have to have a vapor collection or capture system as part of your air permitting. The EPA has proposed to reduce it to 4,000 gallons, which is just about one small fuel truck. So if you're a fuel facility that's transferring more than one truck of gasoline a day, you would have to have vapor capture and control at your facility and install very expensive equipment. So I know for us in Alaska, because we have really widespread infrastructure, we don't have roads, so we get fueled by boats once or twice a year in many of our locations. That's a really big concern for us because we're talking like $750,000 vapor combustion systems at a community that maybe uses 100,000 gallons of gasoline a year. So nationwide, it's going to have huge impacts, but in Alaska specifically, it's going to be an economic disaster. We already have fuel that's anywhere from $6 to $12 a gallon. I've actually seen it as high as 15 a gallon, and that's with state funding to reduce the cost and with bare minimums of, like co-op owned fuel storage and fuel cellars. So we're a microcosm because we're Alaska, but it is something that, one thing I do want to mention is that some things that are good for really large metro areas don't apply well in really small rural areas. But that I am watching that same thing. I think it's the same one.
Well,
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, personally, I think is, they can't raise or lower the emission standards fast enough. But we're in the mass transit world, so we're moving to electric buses. We're moving to even looking at hydrogen fuel cell buses. Even in the state of New York, the the new executive order 22 is asking all, not asking, they're telling state and public authorities, go to zero emission vehicles for the fleets. And I think it's another thing that we could, the government could actually maybe stimulate the movement of the electric or alternative or zero emission vehicles by ensuring that the large fleets start converting quickly enough. A lot of bus agencies, transit agencies across the country are going, we're going to be all electric by 2030 or 2040. So everyone's in the mass transit world is moving toward zero emissions vehicles.
And I'll just add that from my perspective, the EPA standards, what they're talking about doing is giving EVs lower credit. So that means that as a whole, auto manufacturers have to be producing more electric vehicles in order to meet the standards. So it was part of like the stick and carrot with the IRIS bill. There was the carrot was, you're getting these rebates, so people are going to be buying more electric vehicles. Well, now here comes the stick. You've got to be making more of those vehicles and making it a higher percentage of what you're selling as a whole, auto manufacturers. So the New York Times reported that EPA's tailpipe rule could push EVs to as much as 67% of new car sales by 2030. So it could have a huge impact. And I'm pretty excited about it.
I'm excited to have all you smart people here with all this information.
I know. I was just thinking that.
All right. Well, let's end this
Really
track of question because we've got a bunch more sitting here. Mason Miller asked, what would the panel suggest we could be doing better to make the public benefits of NEPA and its requisite studies more evident to the public at large? Essentially, NEPA is good red tape. NEPA nerds, this is your chance.
You want to start, Mike, with that answer? Now that we have a really hard question.
Yeah, good red tape. Not a fan of red tape.
Good red tape?
No, it's not. It's certainly not. I think that, so my stick has always been that, NEPA to me is the first sustainability law ever written for the country. And what was done to it through judicial interpretation kind of gutted the substantive, initial substantive kind of thoughts about what Congress passed, right? So that's my soapbox to start with. So I think that we need to look at other ways to communicate to the public the information that they would be interested in understanding. I think we get very hung up on it needs to be done in 2 years. We get very hung up on it needs to be 75 pages long. And I agree with some of that in terms of the public facing pieces, but we still need to do the due diligence for the benefit of the public so that we aren't making decisions that aren't well vetted on science and policy. And so I guess I'm talking around the circle maybe a little bit, but I think part of that public good is we've started it now better with what has been environmental justice for a long time, and now it's much more front center of the environmental reviews we're doing. It's coming much more to decision making, and so I think all of those things lend themselves to more public benefits than we've necessarily seen in the past, where it could have been just considered red tape and book report writing, and it's really making sure that we're implementing it for positive outcomes, I guess. Thanks for the easy one.
I always love to do that to Mike. I don't know why. It seems to be my MO. But I don't know, Ron, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's what we've seen in NEPA practice, especially in the last 5 or 6 years. It's a much more collaborative process. We do so much community engagement and outreach. In fact, I managed a project in Detroit where we didn't call them public meetings, we called them community conversations. And we just sat down and we did a lot of listening. And then we took all of that input and those ideas into the decision-making process. and came up with a lot of really good enhancements for the community. And that is across the board, including those neighborhoods that may be impacted, in lower income and minority neighborhoods. I mean, clearly that has been a real focus in every project I've managed. In fact, at the upcoming NAP conference, I'm going to be speaking on the state of equity in transportation and what we've seen in that growth of awareness related to the importance of collaboration with everyone. So
yeah, that's perfect. Sunny is trying to make me laugh on camera. I swear that's what the chat is going on. You guys aren't seeing that, I don't think, but yeah, it's great.
Is that really a challenging thing, Nick, to make?
Go ahead. What are you trying to say? Did I laugh at just anything? Because you're right.
No, I can tell you from experience, it is not.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well, folks can't see our group chat that's going on internally here, but a lot of us actually on this panel, I don't know if I would say work together outright, but we have rubbed elbows or crossed paths, or we use each other's technology, right? So we have Microsoft and ESRI represented here. Everybody on this call is, interacting with those tools somehow. So we're all, chatting on the background about, hey, this is how we use the tools to be better stewards of this information, make it more digestible to the public. Nick, you mentioned earlier using story maps to help people understand the context of your environmental impact statements and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of chatter going on in the back, but I'm not the only one spreading the Kool-Aid here on the technology.
No,
only because
not.
As environmental professionals, we're all a bunch of dorks. So we're
that is true. I think that's true of every single person.
So the importance of being here and participating in this chat is just like, this is how you get ahead in this community, is just networking and meeting people and being your dorky self. Next question though, let's keep it rolling. We didn't guarantee a specific time for viewers or our guests, so if anybody needs to drop off, feel free. We'll keep going till the questions that have been posed so far are answered. Even if it's just Nick and I up here until the cows come home, as they say at Ron's house. And Angela Hood has a question. What is the best advice? And I like this because it's off of techie stuff. What is the best advice for undergrad who has met with resistance to career choice by local community? And this one could spark a debate for the next 45 minutes. The best state in the U.S. to start a career path. Yeah, right. Alaska, Shannon, which is cool. We've got Alaska and Florida represented. New York. Do we have anybody from from Mexico, New Mexico, somebody?
California.
There we go. We are the whole map covered of the country.
Pennsylvania.
So.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Yeah, we kind of are all over.
But could you repeat, Laura, the first? I mean, the first part of the question.
It was the best advice for an undergrad who's been met with resistance to career choice by local community. And
resistance to career choice?
Yeah, Angela, if you want to put more detail around that in the chat.
I don't quite get that question. I don't know if somebody else.
Well,
I can take that part Florida. Of the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ethan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I had a weird experience where for a long time in middle school and high school, I was like really, really into math. I was doing a mental math stage show around the world. And then like partway through high school, I was like, oh, I don't really like math anymore. And that was when I found film. And so I was going to go to college for film and television. And then once I got there, the environment piece came in and I ended up doing a dual degree. And now I kind of use both. But when I was applying to schools, I was getting a lot of people who were like, what the hell are you doing going into film instead of math? And I remember having a tough time with it because I knew that was what I wanted to do, but I felt that I wasn't getting taken seriously, and it took a long time to really feel like I convinced people. But I guess what I would say, and I'm sure other people going into environmental spaces are in different situations, but I think this advice applies broadly. First off, I think if you feel you're passionate about something, go for it. And college is also such a great place to explore and try new things. Even though I stuck with my film and TV degree, I went in thinking I'd be making like Christopher Nolan writing, directing, and I came out a climate podcaster. So you can really evolve even if you stay within the same space. But I would also say college is such a great place to kind of start over and reset and make yourself who you want to be. And for me, that was so valuable. I don't think I even told any of my friends about my prior math life until halfway through, at least. And that was great. And then also just trying to like dive into what you're passionate about as much as you can. That really, I found, helps people take you seriously. It was when I started making some short films on my own that were actually decent and getting into some small film festivals that then people were like, oh, okay, he can do this. And then they were starting to be more supportive. And then on the climate side, similarly with Sweaty Penguin, at first it was a challenge to get family to even listen. Now they listen because they enjoy it and not even because it's me. But that really took just putting in a lot of hard work. So I guess those would be my pieces of advice to someone feeling resistance about their college interests. But more than anything, just stick with it. And the more passionate you are, that's contagious, and people will start to support you at some point.
Yeah, I was close. She's in Texas, and when she tells people that she's studying environmental science, policy, and management, she gets backlash and it all turns political. So that's not surprising. But personally, I would say that's the reason for this. You gotta make friends with like-minded people and find your crew, right?
Oh yeah, and even even when it's challenging,
in Texas, she can gang up with.
Yeah, it's all the more reason. Texas does have a lot of great water quality stuff that they do too. It's
I was just gonna say, I think the real, what's going on, especially in the government level, is very different from some of the stories that we see in the media. And I just got back from the Environmental Council of the states, and to see these states get together and talk about really tough subjects without getting into fisticuffs about it. I mean, yeah, there is real collaboration happening, whether or not people see that in the news. And I find that very heartening, and I love to see it. And I always come away from that meeting just super optimistic. So.
Yeah. And I do like that there's a lot of chat going on amongst the people watching to each other. So that's cool.
That's awesome.
I would
advice.
I'm going to do a little plug for Texas. So if you are interested, Texas does have its own state chapter of NAEP, where you could find more local folks that could provide some local advice to you and develop a network that way as well. So you can certainly find that information on our website, not to totally plug, but at naep.com, and look at the state chapters for finding those local folks that you may not know and want to meet with.
Yeah,
thank you.
Perfect.
All right. Let's move on to the next one. Patrick Lauer, how do you get smaller civil site development to prioritize environmental work, lead landscaping, long-term stormwater, when they really aim only to hit the bottom line?
I can jump into this one and
go for it.
And I would say that if you can package a solution that actually reduce a cost, or reduce a risk, or creates a benefit, or improves the value. If you can package a solution providing that, then it will stick, because those are the language that the numbers wants to hear. And I think that is the solutions that we need to come around to say, it's not political. It's not if you're here or there. It's the best thing to do. Is what brings more value to it. Yeah.
Right.
The thing is that you need to be creative, right?
Yeah. I think this is what Ethan does day in and day out, tries to level the playing field and talk about these things in nonpartisan ways.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I through my work, I interact with people on both sides of the aisle all the time, and all else equal, everyone wants clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. That is always a place to start in terms of finding common ground. And then from there, I mean, everyone wants their lives to be better. Everyone wants a healthy economy. You can start at that base level, and then from there, you can really start to say, okay, here's what my concerns are, and find common ground. And I just with that perspective, I find that I can have great conversations with anyone and honestly learn a lot from people who might share different opinions because I didn't think of something a certain way, but now I see their concern and I can go off it. That was why I asked that question about the EPA thing, because I was like, these people are gonna know a lot more than I do just reading an article, so I want to know what they think. But that applies broadly.
Yeah, and I love that answer to that question also had different perspectives because every area is slightly different. You know, we can't apply the same things to the same spot. You know, it just won't work. So there's got to be communication all the way across the board.
Yeah, and actually just to jump in also, doing the stakeholder engagement work I do, and anytime I do environmental justice talks, I actually start off, instead of having a picture on my bio slide, I actually show a picture of our children, my son Connor and my daughter Haley. And I go into a story about how I'm so passionate about what I do because of them, because I want to make the world better for them. And if you're doing outreach work, you might have difficult public hearings and run into people who stereotypically would scare the hell out of scientists. They're so passionate because they're also thinking about their children. So starting with the commonality is a very, very strong way to move forward. And not every issue here has to be polarized. You can go at this objectively.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just had a meeting workshop with a bunch of managers from a large environmental consulting firm, and one of the questions that they had was like, how do I relate to my clients better in Zoom calls and everything else? And I think everything you said applies. And those of you in the chat who are asking questions who might be earlier in your career, it's not just a problem that you might have as a younger person or newer to your field. This is a challenge for everyone. Next question. What
say Laura and Nick, I do have to drop off.
Okay.
I do have a family commitment. Just a couple shout outs. I finished one of the leadership blogs, as Laura, as you know, that'll be posted later this week on the NAP website. You can go on nap.org. There's a quick link to the leadership blogs. And you don't even have to be an NAP member. That's one of the great things, that you can access that, as well as I believe the EPR episodes, right? The podcast episodes. Yep. And then you're both gonna do a live session at the NAP conference, right? That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought I saw that. That's great. I will stop by to say hi, and I will read my latest poem to you.
Yeah.
And to everyone. It's called Survival of the Friendliest. Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you for those reminders. Thank you
being
again
with everybody tonight. I loved it. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Next question. We've just got a couple left to get through. Let's see.
Oh man, this next one's big. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to read this one, Nick? You're following.
What? Who is it? I can't even see who's sending.
Sarah Thompson question.
Sarah Thompson. All right. What advice or words of wisdom would you give to your younger professional self about starting work in this field? Any lessons that stick out?
Maybe I start with this question. Someone changing 5 careers so far. So don't limit yourself. I would say don't limit yourself to one field. You never know what you will like the next. So I started with chemistry, then materials testing, environmental, GIS, ecotourism, then business development, right? So there could be different opportunities for you out there. So, but be good at what you're doing right there. I mean, if you're doing environmental, be good at it, then move to the next, not just doing half and then move to the next. That's what I would suggest.
Who else has lessons? I know we've got lessons.
I agree. I will say that, and I was talking yesterday about this, the combination of what you are passionate about, and then what you are good about, and then what other people are interested in or you can get paid for doing, and then what the world needs. That combo, it will come around, but you need to stick to it. You need to be good at it. You need to keep on going, and it will take time. But that combo eventually start to put the pieces in place, and and it's a good thing. Yeah, but then passion and quality, and then what the world needs, and what you can get paid for, right?
Yeah. Rachel, I want to hear from you. You've been quiet.
Yes, very unique career path too.
Yeah. So I guess young me, I was thinking about that a lot recently. The contract that I just got off of, I was in the South Pacific. So I've gone from the Solomon Islands to Tahiti. So I was in Tahiti 3 days ago, and that's where I got off. So I just went to a lot of these tiny little islands in the South Pacific that all of this climate and environment we're talking about, we're here battling it, but they're the ones dealing with it on the front lines. And so I guess little me didn't have a plan. Like it was like, go out and travel the world. And now if I could talk to her, I'd be like, keep going, keep doing it, because you'll figure out your path along the way. And so I collected I got degrees, but then I collected certifications, and I just more went for places, which I feel like is maybe different. And it's allowed me to find myself on islands and finding out what they think about climate. And if any of you guys know Vanuatu, I believe is the island that is like, I forget who they're suing, but they're suing like the world for climate, like the first. And they're saying you guys are the ones that are adding the most to the environment, and we're the ones being affected the most. So I don't know. I never thought I'd be where I was. So just telling young me to keep following what's interesting. It's okay to not have a plan, because I definitely didn't.
No, that's a good. I love that message too. Like, just pay attention to what you actually like about what you're doing, and eventually you'll get to where that's all you're doing. Man, maybe not all you're doing, but what you do most of the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of serendipity in this world, and I went to school to be a chemical engineer, and I actually thought I would be in the fossil fuel industry, either that or in the makeup industry, one or the other. I graduated and I couldn't find a job as a chemical engineer, and I actually got a job as an environmental technician, and that's how I started doing environmental work. And just from the first day out in the field, taking samples, it was just like I like this. This is cool. And I think I didn't have a plan either. I just I actually thought I would be a center fielder, but that didn't work out because I couldn't hit the curveball. So but I think just take things, have a short-term plan, a mid-term plan, and a long-term plan, and just sort of they're gonna move as you move along, and just have fun with whatever you're doing, and that's, I think, the main thing I would tell my younger self. Your career is going to be a lot of fun. I didn't think it would be, but it turned out to be, and it's been a great career, and look where it's got me here. So it's it is really been a great ride.
Got us all right here. Woo! Great place to be. Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, and I feel the same. Plan but don't plan but don't worry if your plan fails or changes. Also recognize when you're not having fun anymore. Because then it's time to move on, and it's okay to do that.
Laura, I had a very good friend that she was a professional swimmer, long distance swimmer, the first lady to cross back and forth between the France and England. This very long term, and she was saying that you're swimming towards that direction, but you're swimming here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going there, but you're swimming here. So the place where you swim is just there, because it will take 2 days. So if you are concerned of, are we there yet? Are we there yet? You will never do it. So you swim there, just in the same place. So it's nice to have a direction, but then also remind ourselves that we are in this moment.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
You guys are all
great.
full of
I-
wisdom.
Could I add one more piece of advice to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I came from
100 pieces of advice, but you can give us one more.
I came from a very modest background, and I think when I was younger, I was really, really worried about making money, because to me that equaled security. And I think for many people listening, that's probably a major concern in their lives. And one of my pieces of advice would be to sit down and think about how much you actually need to survive and be comfortable, not wealthy, but comfortable. And when you're young, keep that number in mind and select opportunities that will meet that basic need, but also allow you to explore and have fun. I think sometimes when all you're worried about is money and people tell you things like, just do whatever feels good to you, you're like, dude, I'm not making enough money right now. I need to make some more. And you lose the ability to see the forest for the trees. And so I think if you sit down as a young person or younger in your career, like you're starting a new career, you know what your minimum needs are. It's a lot easier to say yes to an opportunity without worrying it to death or only taking the highest paid opportunity. So that's my advice.
Love it. Thank you, everyone. That's a great question. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, that was good.
You want to read this one from Nate Burles, Nick?
Sure. Is anyone collecting information with a sensor?
That's Micah. That was from back
That's
to the
Micah? Did
technology
we get that one already? Oh,
Yeah.
can you describe any recent trends? Is that the one?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, here we go. This is perfect. I planned it this way. Can you describe any recent trends or changes in the environmental regulations or policies that are impacting your work? And I know from the NEPA perspective, we're gonna this question will be different in a few months. But yeah, all of them.
Shannon's doing all of them. Yep, everything.
Yeah. It's been a really,
Okay, well, this is going to go on until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Can we maybe just pick one or two real quick? Everyone's favorite changing trend?
mentioned that earlier, right? I mean, that's
Anything
impacting
anybody
everybody.
like is
But
happy
Matt's
is changing?
came off mute first, so he's got to
I
talk.
did.
That's the rules.
I only have a very myopic perspective from corporates and financial services, and it's CSRD, it's the ISSB, and it's the SEC all day long in the corporates. So basically providing sustainability information to the balance sheet. Every company is focused on it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Not really environmentally related though, because it doesn't measure impact. It just measures disclosures and everything else.
Right. And
top
then
of
only
mind.
some. Right. Not all of you. Not all. So just
I'll add that something that I think is really interesting, and this is my takeaway from reading the infrastructure bill. You know, that infrastructure bill in particular, it's a lot of existing programs, but what it did was this masterclass in messaging from the White House. And the message that they were trying to send us was be more resilient, be more sustainable, be more equitable. Those three things. And so I think we're really seeing the implications of that now, and the influence of that, and how do we define those things? How do we measure success in these areas? It's a really interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. And I think those are all great things, but the conversations around that amongst different industries are fascinating. And then again, you know, technology, and how does technology rise to support answering those questions, help us understand them, measure them, see it across the landscape. So that's kind of fascinating to me right now.
I'll say very quickly, as someone who is trying to cut through the doom and gloom of climate change and spread hope, that every policy, even the baby steps that takes a positive step forward, makes my job a whole lot easier and more fun.
I think one of the struggles is just the uncertainty around where the regs are and what's being proposed but not finalized, and what's being evaluated and not proposed, and how we move forward through time and trying to get these projects reviewed and you know, develop mitigation and still work towards, you know, the kind of carbon-free future that the infrastructure bill is focused on as well, right? But we know we have listing bats, and we're going to list another bat, and there's another one on the way. And basically that means any tree you touch is potential for an endangered species issue. And so in those ranges. And so that's really challenging to try to understand that's coming, but not have a pathway necessarily through it yet. in order to promote the conservation of the species and the recovery of the species, while also trying to meet kind of the climate change goals of getting off fossil fuels and getting into more renewable energy. And so I think some of those challenges, even from a NEPA standpoint too, in terms of part 2 of the regulation revisions and understanding how those are going to roll out, just that uncertainty makes the job harder. I mean, there's always going to be uncertainty because then they're going to be litigated for however long that's going to happen. But just kind of waiting and waiting for for some things to roll out.
You know, there's a very interesting thing happening in the UK with the biodiversity metric, in which it was a voluntary program last year, and now it will become mandatory, in which any new project needs to measure their baseline and then measure their impact, and then prove that in the performance they will have 10% more of whatever they started with. So it's not perfect. It will be interesting to see how it evolves, but at least it's saying it's not enough to recognize what you have and how you're going to mitigate it somewhere else. You need to prove that you can actually improve the conditions of where you are impacting. And I think that mind frame is really interesting to see happening.
Yeah, and I mean, here, one of the other challenges we have is even when we do get legislation, sometimes we have to read that and say, well, this wasn't written in a way that's going to change the way we're doing things, because we have precedent that we also have to deal with. Or at least we don't think it will, but it still could. So there's all these nuances that come into policy, and I love seeing proactive examples of that. But it is challenging. It's really hard to say that this is going to work. This is the way we're going to go, because we do get a lot of back and forth. Is this actually going to stick?
I will just add, if I can, I think that the tax credits for EVs is a policy that we're already starting to see, like the change happening. We're seeing billions of dollars coming stateside for manufacturing of the vehicles and for the battery components and for the battery recycling even. So and you're starting to see it, to Sunny's point, in like popular perception and being a masterclass in messaging, where there's just, I think it was just released today or yesterday, that 40% of Americans are considering or strongly considering an EV for their next vehicle. That's changed very quickly in the past 5 years. So
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and just jump in, guys. I'm sorry, I've enjoyed this, but I have to put both my children to bed. So thank you, everybody. I have to jump off.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank
and
you,
hi to
Chris.
your family. I know
I'm
you
gonna
said they
jump
were
off
watching.
Have a
We
good
have
night,
one
everybody.
question left for anybody who wants to stay. There's just one.
I think
left
I'm
here
going
in
to go
chat.
too.
Okay.
All right, man.
Thank
Thanks,
you so much
guys.
for joining.
Yeah,
This
it's so
was
great to see you.
fun.
Thanks for joining from the dark side.
Thanks.
All right. The last question we had in here. Can I find it again?
Oh, it would have been a good one for Matt. Oh, well.
Oh, did you find it before me?
The greenwashing?
Yes, read it.
How do we move beyond greenwashing to changes that really make a difference in operations or business? I know, it would have been perfect for Matt.
This was the perfect question for Matt.
I know. But he has answered that on his podcast episode, by the way. So
Yes.
his very
Good
first
plug.
one. So you should go listen to his first appearance.
So I would assume that the question comes from somebody that is not actively participated in a project, because it's not that you are working saying, oh, this is my best greenwashing project that I have ever done. It's somebody that is looking at a project saying, oh, that's greenwashing.
Right.
And is asking how we move out of that, right? And how we can see real effects and real things. And because it's a very different thing when you are behind the wheel or when you are just watching the thing go by.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would say that we can dream of a potential in a project that could improve things dramatically, but then you need to realize the constraints around them. And some projects will be perceived by some people like limited or faulty, but in a way, and I come back around to the stakeholder engagement, if you engage with the people then it will be less criticized, because you cannot hide what you are showing, right? So I just have an example. I mean, I was working in the Caribbean, and we were being criticized of the project that we were doing, because they were saying that it was like a pristine place and it was like a mangrove paradise, and there was one mangrove tree, but the people were saying this and that, and I, until I reached out to the most vocal opponents, and I said, let's go together to walk the place, because you haven't been there. And until we were there taking photos together of what the real place looked like, then they changed the perspective and the tone, Some people will criticize because they don't know. And some people will greenwash because that's what they do. But I mean, in order to get out of the greenwashing machine, jump into the project, jump into the effort, and try to do it real,
Get involved. I think too, we're quick to use jargon, right? Whether it's greenwashing or red tape. Someone brought up red tape before. Red tape's important because, we want to look before we actually leap off that cliff and realize there's rocks on the bottom rather than a river. And so that red tape is important for us to do those checks and balances on development versus, maintaining a healthy environment, the clean air, the clean water that Ethan mentioned earlier, right? So we just need to be really careful too with how quick we throw out some jargony terms without digging into kind of what the rationale is, what the reason is behind it, what the work that is being done behind it. And I think is the same with what you're saying too about greenwashing, and get involved if you think there's a problem, that's why there's public engagement, stakeholder engagement, engage.
Yeah. And I think also, write something, document it with real references. And I've been waiting for a question where I could plug my next book. I think this was the one. I wrote a book in 2017 called Sustainable Mass Transit, and a first edition, and a second edition is coming out in June. So I hope everyone gets a chance. It's a sustainability book. It talks about mass transit's revolution and being sustainable. I also talk about the response to the COVID pandemic, where mass transit kept going, essential workers, moving essential workers. And finally, I actually included a chapter on environmental sustainability professionals, which is really sort of separate, could be a standalone chapter. And it was really an homage to people in this business, because there's not one pathway to becoming a sustainable professional. Everybody has a different pathway with different backgrounds, coming from different states. And so I hope everyone gets a chance to check it out in June.
Yeah, that's great.
I also wanted to jump in on the greenwashing question. I second everything Mike was saying, but I wanted to add that a lot of the responsibility, at least from my perspective as a journalist, falls on us to go into all these different solutions and examine what's working and what isn't. I think solutions journalism in general is something that a lot of us in the climate journalism space are talking about more, and my colleague Farah Warner at the Solutions Journalism Network has expressed that solutions journalism can and often should be investigative journalism, looking into here's the solution, is it working, what are its limitations, what can it do, how is it affecting different communities, asking a lot of difficult questions. I think when we think of climate news, we're either thinking of the world is doomed by this new report, or we're thinking of meet this whiskey company that's doing everything carbon neutral, and there's never an in-between. And I think some of these more gritty solution stories that can actually try to investigate what a company's doing and if it's going to be effective or not can give people that nuance that Mike was talking about, and uncover whether something is effective or isn't, or if it can be more effective if certain challenges are overcome.
Heck yeah. And that is a great spot to end on. That's our show, folks. I mean, we've run out of time and questions. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And we had such great questions coming through. Thank you again to everyone that's on the Zoom link here with us. We can't do this stuff without you. It means so much to us that you guys showed up. So thank you so much. We will plan to have another one at some point, maybe the next quarter, and we hope you guys will join us. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps us with visibility. And thank you again for STV for sponsoring. I think I've covered it all. I don't know, Laura, did I miss anything? Are we ready to go?
You got it. I think you got everything. And again, all of you guys, thank you so much for joining. This was a lot of fun. I loved the back chatter. I'm going to say it again. I love that my BF from middle school is in here talking environmental work with me. That's super cool. Along with all of my newer and in between friends, Nick, who I've met twice in person, but spend more time with than anybody else I know. So, no, this has been awesome. So thanks. And if anyone did have any wrap up questions that we didn't answer or you think of later, everyone here is approachable. They've all signed a silent contract that you're allowed to say, hey, we saw you on EPR. I have a question.
Ask away. We did. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Go eat some food. Go to bed.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Yeah, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Pleased to meet you all.
All right. Bye.